every character that you create will have emotions. And that's kind of something you can't really get away from. So if you go, even aliens, as you just kind of use that as your example, we like to think that aliens are going to fall in love, presumably, otherwise there wouldn't be future aliens. So they're still going to have the basic they're still going to have the basic emotions that we all experience. So they can be sitting on a planet that's got a name that we've never heard of, in a world that we can't even begin to comprehend, but actually they can be upset, or they can be hurt, or they can be scared, or they can, all of the things that we will experience.
Welcome to Storytelling Insights, art, science, and great conversations with storytelling insights from researchers, artists, teachers, and many more. Great. Well, welcome Anne-Marie Winkle, a friend, a colleague, someone who I've been talking to about stories for, I don't even remember how long, but it's been a while now. So I'm so glad to have you on. Thanks for coming on to share. So let's start maybe at the usual place where I like to start is tell us a little bit about you and what's your connection to stories?
Gosh, so I've always loved stories. I just remember always wanting to read. There was a standing joke in my family when I was a child that whenever we were on holiday, all I ever used to do was read. And my parents got a kind of weird amusement out of making sure they took a photograph of me reading a book every single holiday. So I guess I've always just enjoyed the written word and the way it can transport you somewhere else. That became a very powerful tool for me. And then I'd kind of, as I got older, thought to myself that I would want to write, but I didn't think I'd have the patience to do it. So I knew that I could write reasonably well from my school grades and stuff like that, but it wasn't something that I ever considered I would genuinely achieve. And one of the main reasons that I thought I would never be able to write a book was because I'm quite an impatient person. And when I read a book, I might have shared this before, but when I read a book, I will read the beginning. And if it's something that I'm really invested in, then I read the end. And then I go back and read the middle, which everybody thinks is really weird. And it is really weird. But it kind of, it's an odd, I don't even know why I do it. I would love to explain why I do it, but it's more like, that's the beginning. I love it. Oh, great. It ends how I want it to end. So now I can finish the rest of it. I had this thing in my head that I wouldn't be able to write the middle of a story. I thought I can write the beginning. I'll be able to write the end. The middle, I'm just going to get bored. And that was kind of the mindset that I went through. And then as I got older and kind of moved into adulthood and all of the different challenges that you face as you get older, it became apparent that I had all of this stuff that I just needed to dump somewhere, and I didn't really know what to do with it. And so one day, which is probably about 12 years ago now, I basically got my computer out, sat down and started typing, and then wrote 6,000 words. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe I can do this. So then that kind of started me on the journey, and it's been a heck of a journey. Yeah. I've written some really good stuff. I've written some really bad stuff. I did a lot of blogging in the early days. I've done various different courses. I did a course with the Writers' Bureau so that I could get accreditation with them, and just loads and loads of different bits and pieces. And that's sort of my journey. And then as I've got older, writing has just become a bigger part of my life to where I am now.
Yeah, Thank you. Thank you. That's, I guess, what led you to begin a book, which is where you help people to essentially publish their own stories in their own writing. And you've got a number of books you've published yourself, haven't you? And one particular novel, which has done quite well as well. So I'm just kind of wondering, what would you say your secret is to great storytelling?
Gosh. I want to use a word that I'm actually not a big fan of because I think it's an overused word, but I want to say authenticity.
Okay, I thought you were going to say unprecedented for a minute.
No, I'm getting a bit tired of seeing authentic everywhere. But when you, so I work with fiction and non-fiction. I'm a fiction writer. I will always write fiction books because that's my absolute passion, but I work with non-fiction as well. And it's just as important in non-fiction as it is with fiction to make sure that you've got this authentic voice. And what I mean by that is allowing the reader to see who you are. And with a non-fiction book, it's all well and good saying, okay, I'm going to tell you there's 10 different ways you can peel a banana, here you go. I don't know if there are, by the way, I've just thrown that out there, no idea. But and you just kind of list them, boom, 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 which is great, but that doesn't actually give me any confidence in that person that's written it. So what I do, is kind of work with people to just say, okay, well, let's dig a little bit deeper, and how can we actually get the reader to understand why we're telling them this information and what it's going to give them and how it's going to benefit them, and what your validity is really for offering that. And then it's the same really with fiction, because fiction is a product of ourselves. And even though we create something that might bear absolutely no resemblance to us or our lives, it's come from here. So really what you need to do is just kind of allow yourself to let that out. And that happens when you work with your characters and you get to know your characters really well, and then they become an extension of you, and you get to understand how they feel about things. So a lot of the work that I do with fiction writers is around developing characters, and just making sure that if I was to ask somebody a question as their character, they could actually answer it, because that's the difference between a two-dimensional character and a three-dimensional character. And it's literally, that's it. It's working with the author to make sure that their voice is coming through. And that's how I do it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm actually thinking, so I wrote my first fiction piece, and the characters there are quite intuitive. I think I could probably, if you were to ask me about them, I could probably answer, but I didn't sort of delve deeply into the characters at the outset. But I guess one of the interesting points, or from listening to you, is, the characters, how do they feel about something? So there's a big emotive component there. Why does that really matter for storytellers?
It matters because it enables you to present the character in a way that makes sense to the reader. So if you've got a character who you've not done your homework on, and you've just given him a name and an age, and he's tall and handsome and good looking and he's got loads of money, brilliant. So he comes across a particular circumstance in his journey. If you haven't developed him, you don't have a clue how he would genuinely react to that situation. Now you can make it up and go, oh, well, I think what he'd do is this, this, and this. That's fine. But when he comes to the next obstacle and the next obstacle and the next obstacle, there's not going to be any continuity, because you're just guessing as you go along. Whereas when you get to know your characters deeply, and as you know yourself, you can pretty much understand how they're going to react, and that will be a faithful reaction that will come throughout the book. So it comes out in their mannerisms, it comes out in the way that they speak, it comes out in the language that they use, it comes out in their reactions, and you can't express any of those unless you understand the emotional, the emotional parts of your character, because you just don't know. Otherwise, it's just surface and you're making it up.
Yeah.
It sounds mad because fiction is made up, but hopefully you know what I mean.
Yeah. So we want it to be identifiable to our real experience. So I guess even if they're flying in a time machine through space on a planet that humans haven't even discovered yet, we still want to know how they actually feel.
Because whatever, every character that you create will have emotions, and that's kind of something you can't really get away from. So if you go, even aliens, as you just kind of use that as your example, we like to think that aliens are going to fall in love, presumably, otherwise there wouldn't be future aliens. So they're still going to have the basic they're still going to have the basic emotions that we all experience. So they can be sitting on a planet that's got a name that we've never heard of, in a world that we can't even begin to comprehend, but actually they can be upset, or they can be hurt, or they can be scared, or they can, all of the things that we will experience. And as a reader, yes, obviously you want to build your imagination around this world, and you want to understand it, and you want to visualize it, but you also want that bit that you can connect with, because otherwise you won't enjoy the book and you won't get it. And that's the whole point, is whether it's fiction or non-fiction, there has to be something that the reader can go, I get it. Yeah. I understand that. I can feel that too. Or I've been in that situation too. And that's kind of when the reader will buy into the book.
Yeah. Do you think that could be conveyed without a story? Or why is the story so powerful for conveying that emotion?
I think because it's a journey. And if you think about emotions that we experience, you don't kind of just get up in a morning and think, oh, today I'm going to have a sad day, and then tomorrow you get up and think, today I'm going to have a happy day. It's always a combination of factors that affects your emotions, and often they are things that have happened over a period of time. So I don't know, it might be that you work with somebody that you actually don't really like, but on day one it's okay and you're fine and you buy them a coffee, but by the time you get to kind of week 2, you're thinking, actually I really don't like them, and so your mannerisms are changing, and so that's why. And it could, till you get to 6 months in, and then you might be seriously fed up with them. And
have you been spying on me in my
Did you not notice the cameras? but you have to do the same with the story. You can't just literally go, boom, this has happened, because the reader's like, well, no, that's just not how that's not reality. Reality is that emotions, all of the things that happen to us, happen over a period of time, and that's why you need to have a story. And you also need to have a story because the Greeks told us hundreds of years ago that we needed to have stories.
Yeah.
So that's it.
Yeah, there is that thing, isn't there? It's been with us for so long, and it always seems to work. And this is one of the powerful exploration points, actually, is that we have this storytelling brain, and it loves and it just devours stories, but still the story has to have these sort of components. So the characters have to be well developed in the story so that the audience member or the reader can identify better with the characters, so that they can say, oh, well, that's me. I get it. I can feel what they feel.
Yeah.
And going back to your liking to read the end after you sort of read the beginning. So
Yeah.
that's really fascinating, because I think that cut to the chase thing is was
Yeah.
invented for you probably, or reader like a reader
Yeah.
like you. But you still go back to the story and enjoy that.
Yes.
So what is happening for you and or us as consumers of story in that experience?
What, reading the end before the middle, or just the whole?
Yeah, the whole thing of, I guess it doesn't really matter the order per se.
Oh, okay.
But I guess in your journey, um
My journey's a bit back to front, but it's fine. No, it's that world that you can escape into. So this is obviously from a fiction point of view primarily. It's something that you can identify with. You can understand what's happening. You can see how it could happen, and it's taking you to a different world. And it's, escapism, isn't it, I suppose. And it's just building on it to make it more and more powerful. Now that can be achieved in lots of different ways. I love writing twists in my books. I love the fact that hopefully people don't know what's coming next. And that's a great way of really engaging the reader in the story, because they're like, oh, I think I've got it sussed. Oh, no, I haven't. And that kind of thing. But it just takes us on a journey that we can identify with. In some cases, it's a journey we wish we could live. In other cases, we'll read it and go, blimey, I thought my life was bad. It's just, but it's all about the human connection that we need, whether it be with a person or whether it be with a movie or whether it be with a book. We need that connection just to take us out of ourselves for a little bit. It can be an educational piece, obviously, as well. A lot of books now tend to have an important theme running through them to help with, current issues. And that can be quite an interesting experience as well, because you can use it, you can educate through the characters, through the situation. We're in a sort of uncharted territory now with so many different things. So you can kind of come away from it going, I know a little bit more about that now. Or maybe, the next time I see so-and-so, I'll be nice to them rather than horrible to them, or whatever it might be. But I think it is just that connection. It's that sort of the thing about wanting to belong and feeling part of something, and then just kind of going, yes. And then you get to the end and you're like, when's the next one?
Yeah. I read somewhere recently, I don't remember where I read this actually, it was in a book, about, I think it might have even have been a book about habit forming, actually. I don't even think it was about stories, but there was something in there about dopamine and how the anticipation of an event is the reward that we sort of get inside is actually greater in the anticipation than it is to receive the thing itself.
Yeah.
So, I imagine as we consume stories and we're like, oh, what's gonna happen next? Because you just mentioned about the suspense factor and things like that. And that's interesting, because actually next week, I've actually got a guest who is a man called Dr. Keith Bound. He actually specializes in fear and suspense in film. So this is
wow.
good. This is just randomly good order, actually. The universe provides.
Exactly. Or no, you just say it's all planned. It was all perfectly planned.
Of course it was. Where's that book? So just going back a little bit to your secret sauce is about you really help people to get those characters developed, because the human connection and identification with the characters is an important part of the story and the narrative. What would you like to see more of in storytelling? Is there something you think maybe we're not using properly in stories, or there's more potential that's not being exploited?
I think a lot of people, because writing a book is accessible now. So, you know, way back when, it was something other people did. We didn't have computers, we had typewriters. It was hard work. If you made a mistake, it was, you know, whereas now with technology, it's so much more accessible. And anyone can put something on Amazon. You don't have to have any qualifications. You don't have to be any, you know, you don't have writing qualifications. I mean, you can literally just, you could write, you know, I am a novel, I'm great fun, the end, and put it on Amazon if you wanted to. What that's done is two things. It's done a really great thing because it's opened up the world to people like me and others to be able to see our books in print, to see our name in print, and to see our work out there. But what it's also done is encouraged not so well-rounded works to be put out there as well. And what I sometimes struggle with, you know, as a writer who tries very hard to deliver my craft in a way that I believe will add value to the reader, is when you see books, they might be written by celebrities that are actually really not very good, but they're climbing the bestseller list. Now, obviously, that's not going to change. You know, me sitting here saying that is going to make no difference to that whatsoever. But I think what would be nice to see is more people embracing the simplicity of who they are and what they can give from themselves without hiding behind this persona. Or because I just think once we start to identify with some of our stories and we tell some of our stories, it's amazing how many people will relate. And I think that's what I'd really like to see more of. And funnily enough, I was at a networking group this morning, and the lady was doing that did the presentation was talking about her corporate life, and she was relaying this story. And a few of the other women in the room were saying, oh gosh, yes, I experienced that, and I experienced that. And the net result was that half a dozen of them decided they wanted to collaborate on a book that I'm going to put together, to put this out there, to say it's not us, because, you know, everybody that was in that situation had thought it was their fault or their problem or whatever. And so they've all gone, no, actually, we've realised now that we've shared our stories and we've been brave enough to do that, and the world hasn't ended, actually, you know, we've got a voice, and that's really, really powerful.
Yeah, I'm really hearing this, the story being a vehicle for your unique voice.
Yeah.
Which is resonant with me in a really big way. I mean, that's my actual message. That's my personal message to the world. You know, we all have a voice inside, and now's the time to discover that voice. So that's even another, dare I say, synchronicity in this conversation.
Again, planned, because this is scripted and I've learned it.
Planned. Absolutely planned. Absolutely planned. Okay, well, yeah, that's really helpful. So where now for stories and you and your work? I guess it's fair to say you want to help people to get their voice out more and use their stories. But you mentioned something that caught my ear, and I think this would be really helpful for people watching. You said that, let's imagine some celebrity hired somebody to ghostwrite a book, and you know, it's climbed up the bestseller list, and it wasn't really that great. What's missing from that book?
Personality.
That not made it great, right?
Because I don't ghostwrite. I don't ghostwrite because it doesn't appeal to me, but I don't ghostwrite primarily because I can't be myself. So I can't possibly pull out what I need to pull out. So if you said to me, right, can you, we're going to have a few sessions and you're going to ghostwrite my book, I wouldn't do it. Now that's just me. There's excellent ghostwriters out there, but the point is, with the best will in the world, I can never understand your emotions, your drive, your passion, because I'm not you. So although you can tell me these things, I can't feel it. And that's, for me, where there is a bit of a disconnect. A ghostwriter, and I'm not dissing ghostwriters by any means, but they are relaying a story rather than telling the story. Whereas when you connect with your own persona, because you've got the whole picture, you haven't just got, the fluffy bit that everyone wants you to see, you've got the warts and all, that's when you get the real stuff.
Personality, authenticity, as you said earlier, not unprecedented, which was last year's word. Authenticity.
Authenticity.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much for that insight. Well, I think there are a few things I learned in this conversation. One of them is character development is super important if we really want the reader or audience member to connect. So I shall bear that in mind for my next piece of writing.
It is really, really important. There's several elements that make up a novel, and we haven't got time to talk about them all now, but I think the character is one of the big ones, because they're the people that are going to take the reader through the story. So yes, it's important to have your scenes and for people to understand where you are and what's going on around and all of those kind of things, but if you haven't got a narrator that's going to give you a good ride, for want of a better word, then you're kind of a bit lost. So.
Yeah. Can I just ask, what kind of exercises would you share with your clients to help them develop their characters? Like any kind of takeaways that we can share?
Yeah, so I've got a worksheet that I'm happy for anybody to have, and it's really just an exercise in asking the right questions of your character so you can start to get the right motivations. And one thing I always recommend people do is grab an image off the internet of who they think their character looks like, preferably not a celebrity. The only reason I say preferably not a celebrity is because every time you look at that image, you're going to think, oh, that's Brad Pitt. So you're going to try and create Brad Pitt out of your character, which isn't going to really work unless Brad Pitt is your character, obviously. But if we're assuming that you've kind of you've got a random character, so I always say to people, pull an image off the internet. You can either print the form out and stick it on, or you can save it electronically, and it's a live document. So every single time you start working with that character, you're going to learn more and you're going to add more to it, and that just enables you to keep the narrative going between you and your character so that you can kind of really understand them. So that's a big thing for me. And then the other thing is a really simple exercise, and I mentioned it earlier, is have a conversation with them. And it sounds completely batty, and it is completely batty, but literally have a conversation with them.
Do you mean like let's say I'm in my office and my Zoom's not on, so you're not there? Yeah, I'd literally just sit here and go, how are you feeling right now, John? And
because I don't know, but maybe this is just me. I talk to my cat. Okay, so I talk to things that cannot respond to me, generally speaking, because that's quite nice. When people respond, sometimes you don't want to know, but it's the same process. I talk to my cat and I imagine the answer he's giving me, which is probably nowhere near what he's actually thinking, if cats do think. But with your characters, that's the whole point, because you could be sitting in your car at traffic lights and thinking, oh, what would you be thinking? And what do you think of that woman in that car, or what? Do you know what I mean? And it's just,
Right. Yeah. So I essentially I embodied the character. I become the character in a way. So I can almost say, let's say I'm at the traffic lights. I could say, John, what are you thinking now? And then I just almost become John, and I go, well,
Yeah.
actually, I feel really impatient right now. Uh, I'm tapping the steering wheel because I don't like sitting at red lights ever. I always like green lights. Or that kind of dialogue that you
Yeah,
imagine would happen?
absolutely. Yeah, and it's just a natural thing. It's not, if it's forced, it doesn't work. And I mean, you don't do this for every character because otherwise you'd be exhausted. But we're talking about your key characters here. Your 2 or 3 main characters, and that can be hard because obviously men would sort of argue, well, how on earth can I write a female character because I haven't got a clue what goes on in a woman's head. For reference, we don't know what goes on in our head either. But yeah. But the interesting thing is, when I started writing, I thought, oh, I'm going to have a female protagonist. That's it. I have got in both of the books, I've got female and male, and the male character I found easier to write. So actually, the fact that we are not of that gender doesn't really provide a barrier. It's just about thinking. So if you go back to John and you've sketched him out as a character who has a bit of a temper, perhaps he is an impatient guy. So when you're sat at the traffic lights, that's going to be his reaction, because maybe he thinks that we shouldn't be having traffic lights and roadworks and whatever. That's not you. You're just reflecting on this person that you've started to create. And it just helps you to kind of understand them. So the whole point really is so that when you're writing, it flows and you don't have to stop and think, oh, what would he do in this situation? And go away and make a cup of tea and come back. And because then you've lost your flow, and readers can tell if it's forced. Yeah. And you don't want it to be forced. You want it to just be a seamless process. And you can only do that if know your subjects really.
Amazing. Well,
you're going to start talking to John at the traffic lights now, aren't you?
I'm already talking to John in my head. I'm like, John, what time of day do you eat? You hungry? Vegetarian? You vegetarian like me? Yeah. What do you fancy for dinner? Do you like winter? Do you like summer?
Exactly. There's a reason why we all had invisible best friends when we were kids.
Yeah. I'm actually thinking now, like, John hates the rain. Okay. He absolutely hates the rain, but he's always in the rain for some reason. Why? If he hates the rain so much, why does he always find himself in the rain, And as anyway, I'll have to take that one up.
You will, yeah. You have to let me know how he gets on. You have to buy him an umbrella.
Oh man, Marie, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your tips, and I'm sure listeners will get some value from this, especially people who want to get into very particular parts of their storytelling. So I appreciate that, and I'll share all your details in the description below so people can find out more about you, and of course download your resources for their character development as well. So wishing you a wonderful day. Thanks for coming on. Oh, before you go, I just want to say thank you for tuning in. Please subscribe to my channel. It means a lot more than you know. And I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Bye for now.